Today's video, Venom Last Dance Breakdown.
My home has found us. We have something my creator needs. There's a key that would free him.
Welcome back, everyone.
Pretty decent movie. I just watched
Venom,
it.
The Last
So
Dance, breakdown, Easter eggs of the entire movie. There's a whole bunch Sony is trying to set up here with the new Symbiotes, with the Knull storyline, crossover, Spider-Man related storyline. They definitely want to get them some Tom Holland.
I love
in their
Knull
Sony
already.
movies. And a lot of the movie is dedicated to setting up a post-Tom Hardy Venom franchise with symbiote characters. That's why there were so many symbiotes in this movie. There were a bunch of changes they made to the comic book storyline, the comic book symbiotes, and a little bit from Knull's storyline too that got changed. So we'll explain everything. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos.
To Emergency Awesome and also
me. If you
me.
haven't seen the movie yet, we'll just start at the beginning, work our way through shot by shot, talking about Easter eggs, WTF moments, big details, starting with the title, The Last Dance, which is meant to be a reference to the Chicago Bulls documentary, The Last Dance, from the Chicago Bulls in the 90s when they had their crazy winning streak. In the movie chronicles the last time that particular team was together before they all broke up, which is meant to be a reference to the Venom symbiote and Eddie who break up during this movie. Arguably, they'll probably eventually get back together because Venom does survive
had to
at
sacrifice
the end of the movie.
himself.
But the movie and Tom Hardy in real life really want you to think that this is going to be the last time that they're ever together. Tom Hardy said that it's his last Venom movie, or last time playing Venom, just because it's the last movie on his contract that he signed for just a trilogy. So Sony just has to back up another dump truck of money for him to come back and play the Venom character again. Because the Venom symbiote, like I said, is alive, so he can do that.
They can leave that universe as a Venom and Symbiotes universe.
Comics, who calls himself the God of the Void. In the comics, he's known more as the God of the Symbiotes and the King in Black, which he also calls himself at the end of the movie in the post-credit scene.
The King in Black is awake. Everyone will burn.
He does a brief history lesson on his character, leaving out a lot of the MCU adjacent stuff like the Celestials and the Big Bang, what happened at the beginning of the universe. In the comics,
he should low-key have a movie of
give Venom a storyline
how they locked him up.
A ton of Spider-Man Peter Parker stuff at first. Now, eventually, Peter Parker got roped into it. The entire Marvel Universe got roped into it. But it got so popular that it turned into a line-wide crossover. So you have Captain America, the Avengers characters, Wolverine crossing over with this Knull Spider-Man Venom storyline. Sony is definitely hoping that it will go that big for them. We will see about that because it seems like Kevin Feige doesn't want anything to do with their Sony Spider-Man spin-off movies. But in the context of the movie universe now, when he says God of the Void, later in the movie, the Toxin symbiote, who is green in this movie, they made some changes to Toxin from the comics. Bonded to Patrick Mulligan from the last movie, like Toxin is in the comics. A lot of people were talking about Toxin, that they did him dirty. The black void that exists around the universe and why it's so dangerous, they don't want to know what's out there. Essentially, it's meant to be Knull. It's meant to be the spaces between universes that he originally came from. He's meant to be a cosmic being that predates the existence of the universe. So the Big Bang happens, and that's what he says in the intro here. Light invades my kingdom. Light invades the void because the universe was born. The cosmic entity
and they locked him up forever.
It gives birth to all the other cosmic entities as well as the Celestials. Then the Celestials task Knull to become the King of the Black, of the void between universes. That's where the title King in Black is meant to come from, which he references later in this movie. He is the King of the Black between universes.
We gotta see a lot more of him too.
Kings. Thank you to Game of Thrones Legends for sponsoring this. I'm going to be giving away this special chest of stuff that they gave me from the game. It's got a ton of stuff. I almost want to keep it. Inside the chest is a deck of playing cards, Tyrion and Ares, on this puzzle and Upkin. Tyrian's iron description, Richard Make Void encompasses way more mass than all the other universes combined.
Back to the video.
He has the chance to become more powerful than anyone in any of the different universes. When we see him, he's trapped by millions of other symbiotes. That's why you see tendrils all over the place. It's basically a cage created by the symbiotes to trap him there. In the comics, the way this went down is that when the Celestials task him to rule the space between universes, he rebels against them and starts killing them after creating the All Black, the sword that you see him holding at the end of the movie in the post-credit scene.
Oh,
it's also referred to as the primal symbiote, aka the very first symbiote, and the idea is that it spawned all the other symbiotes.
saying
So
he's
the
older
symbiotes
than
essentially are pieces of him.
Earth
They're his children.
and
What wound up
universe.
happening, though, is that the symbiotes rebelled against him, then formed the cage, trapping him here where you see him at the beginning of the movie and in the
He
post-credit
was
scene.
destroying every
One of the other
planet.
big changes they make, too, is to say that the xenophage in the movie are other creations of his, separate from the symbiotes, that are loyal to him, as opposed to the symbiotes. Originally in the comics, the xenophage was just like a completely separate race that had nothing to do with Knull, that were predators to the symbiotes, that would just go around eating symbiotes. There is a lot of eating symbiotes in this movie, but for different reasons. Then they adapt
They
the
were cooking them.
essential basis of the King in Black storyline with some changes. So the way they explain is that he actually wants to gain the Codex from the Venom symbiote in Eddie Brock, which was created after the events of the first Venom movie. The Codex is something from the King in Black storyline. It's basically a repository, like an alternate dimension space that holds the DNA of anything that the symbiotes come into contact with across the multiverse. So the whole idea is that you have millions and millions of symbiotes across time and space, across the multiverse, encountering, bonding with all different creatures, all manner of powerful creatures, celestials,
I want to see
gods
that.
like
See
Thor,
that they
other
could do
gods around
that
the universe, just
in the
really
Tom
powerful
Hardy
people.
universe.
Once the Codex is created and starts storing all this information, you can see some of the symbiotes inside the Codex here. Knull is able to resurrect anyone and anything inside the Codex that's stored there. So, for instance, if a symbiote bonded with the celestial host,
That
or
would
a bunch
be
of symbiotes
fucking
bonded with the
crazy as
celestial
hell.
host, Knull could 3D print himself other celestials and then control them and make them part of his army. It gives him a limitless potential for power as the symbiotes begin to spawn across the universe, the multiverse, and just start bonding with more and more things. One of the other changes they make to the comics is to explain how the Codex is created, how it exists. So the idea in the movie universe now is that the Codex is created by a very closely bonded pair of symbiote and host after the
It's
host
like a heart
is killed
almost.
and the symbiote resurrects them using a Codex. They explained retroactively that Eddie died during the events of the first movie when he was impaled. The symbiote, the Venom symbiote, resurrected him with the Codex, creating the Codex that Knull wants to bind to his all-black sword and use it to escape. The other big change is that in the movie universe now,
Better
Knull
hope
has
he'll
the
escape,
ability
'cause
to
it's gonna be
portal the
crazy.
xenophage across the universe. Not across the multiverse, just across the universe. So this is just happening inside the Venom universe. In the comics, there's a different version of Knull in every single universe, but what they're saying in this movie is that there's one version of Knull for the entire multiverse. So they start the movie with him sending the
I like
xenophage
it.
looking
Let him
for
be
the
on
Venom
everyone,
symbiote
though.
who can detect it across the universe on the Venom version of Earth in this universe. And if you couldn't tell from his Gollum-like voice, it is Andy Serkis playing the Knull character. They have big plans for him in the future. Like they said, they have big crossover movies planned with the Spider-Man characters as well, too. More symbiotes, more Sony spin-off characters.
An alien made out of black goo once.
Oh, no way. I fought an
Venom.
alien too. I want to fight an alien.
Hopefully they will not use it to make it full Morbin time again. Just like in the comics, once he escapes, his plan is to essentially conquer the entire multiverse and destroy everything,
Which he
returning
did.
reality to the black void of nothingness that he existed in before the Big Bang. Interestingly enough, we're kind of seeing something similar happen during the lead up to Avengers Secret Wars, where the multiverse, like all of reality, slowly collapses, all the different universes are destroyed until there's only one planet left, aka Battleworld. My
They might
assumption
do
right
that.
now, just based on the way that the Marvel
That's what it's
people are
looking
talking,
like.
is that Sony developed the Knull character on their own, and they're just kind of hoping to piggyback on what's happening with the Secret Wars stuff. So I don't expect to see Knull during Marvel's Secret
Oh,
Wars.
nah.
It's like a
He
completely separate
he
thing.
needs his separate
Then they
stuff.
did the standard Sony version of the Marvel
He's
logo
too
that you
good
see
for
on all
that,
the
I
Sony
think.
only movies, and they basically redo a version of the Spider-Man No Way Home post-credit scene inside the MCU with Venom Eddie Brock sitting at the bar here with the bartender. Football is life. Basically, it's the exact same scene, like cut and paste, like they literally just copied the post-credit scene from Spider-Man No Way Home and attached it to this part of the movie to explain him going back to the Venom universe. So while he's in the middle of this conversation, when he stands up and gets portaled back by Doctor Strange's second spell, they explain
That's
that
just
this
so
portal
people
just
know,
sucks
I
him
guess,
back to his Venom universe.
that
in
he's
the same
not in the
bar,
same
but
universe
in his universe, the
as
bartender is a
Spider-Man.
little bit different. It's more of a dive bar kind of atmosphere. But this isn't meant to be a retcon to the Spider-Man No Way Home post-credit scene where the symbiote piece did get left. There is still a piece of the symbiote inside the MCU that Tom Holland can eventually bond with and have his own symbiote saga. There's a lot of rumors right now that Tom Holland will get that symbiote during Spider-Man 4 at some point. When he comes back to the Venom universe
That would be
version of
crazy.
the
I
bartender
like it.
goes a little bit nuts seeing the Venom symbiote manifest. They have a funny scene. There's a lot of comedy like this in the movie that's just kind of random, with the symbiote doing silly things with him. On the news, he sees that he's being blamed for the death of Detective Patrick Mulligan during the
And then he
events of
wasn't
Venom
even
Let There Be
dead.
Carnage. We find later in the movie
It's
that he
just
was
the
just
government
captured by this
hiding
military group
stuff.
that's running at Area 55, beneath Area 51, where they're collecting and studying symbiotes. He explains the reason why he was kicked out of New York City in the first place and wound up in San Francisco before the events of the first Venom movie is because there was a corrupt judge breaking the law that told a bunch of lies about him, that he wants to go to New York City in blackmail so that he can go back to New York City eventually and clear his name. They never say who the
Max
corrupt
Murdock.
judge was, if it's somebody from the Spider-Man comics. We will see about that, because he does wind up in New York City with his name cleared at the end of the movie. There's a brief action scene with him taking down a couple mobsters, letting the Venom symbiote recharge by eating their brains. Remember, symbiotes basically need a chemical that's produced by people's brains and animals' brains, but it's better inside people's brains. They mostly played the scene for comedy, but just as he finishes letting the Venom symbiote eat all their brains,
Yummy in
one
my
of the Xenophages
tummy.
show up and detects the Codex, because anytime the symbiote is in its fully manifested form like it is here, the Codex becomes visible to them and to Knull. Then we meet a mysterious, powerful, government-associated figure, like a very Nick Fury in the shadows kind of
Oh
person.
yeah, I wonder who that
calls
is.
General Rex Strickland from the comics, played by Chiwetel Ejiofor. Bear Mordo from the MCU showing up in this movie is Rex Strickland, who's a former host to a symbiote, became a super soldier by being bonded to a symbiote. There are a bunch of changes to his character in this movie. He's supposed to have died at the end of the film, or they implied that he died in the explosion, but he also does not bond with the symbiote at any point or talk about having done it in the past. One of the big mysteries of the movie, though, is they never say who this mystery shadow figure is.
Yeah, so we should get more
Strickland's
Venom
strings.
movies
He
then.
calls him a couple times in the movie and just
Or
gives them marching orders.
symbiotes or
There's a bit of
something.
hand waving. Maybe
There's
they'll
a lot of
eventually reveal, maybe
stuff
the director will reveal in a couple weeks. They explain
that
that
they didn't
Strickland is
really
running a team called the JUY, which is
finish
based on a
explaining.
comic book team from the Venom comics, going around collecting symbiotes to try and eventually form a symbiote army like they do in the comics. He shows up after Venom leaves this bar and captures the piece of the symbiote that the symbiote spawned again. Kind of seems like he's just spawning left and right across this movie. There are so many symbiotes in this film, but not all the many symbiotes are spawned of Venom itself. Some of them are spawned of the other symbiotes from the first Venom movie. One of the other big changes they make too is to explain why the symbiotes came to Earth in the first place during the events of that first movie. They say that they were running away, trying to get away from Knull. Then we meet Juno Temple's character. She's playing a gender-bent version of Thaddeus Payne from the comics, called Teddy Payne in the movie. She also has electrical-based power. She's meant to be a metahuman in this movie, and winds up bonding with the purple symbiote Agony from the comics later in the film. So presumably, she'll continue to have that
She was
Agony
like the
symbiote when she
Flash.
comes back in future movies.
Fastest.
One of the other changes to her comic book character is that in the comics,
Yeah.
Thaddeus Payne was pretty evil. Her character in this movie is meant to be good. They gave her a little bit of backstory with this brother that died because of her powers going on the fritz, so she has this guilt in this future wanting to study the stars that her brother had that she basically takes on herself. Most of this is just to help develop her character. Like I said, I think they want this character to be in future spin-offs. That's why they're giving her so much backstory in this movie. They explained their government-funded research base is Area 55 beneath Area 51, which during the events of this movie, they're in the process of decommissioning Area 51 to make it seem like nobody is out here, nothing is happening, even though they're below ground doing all this stuff. There are a couple MacGuffins
just
that they
took it
set up
down
and pay off later
to the
during the
bottom.
final battle. So when she's driving in her truck, she drives past these towers of super acid. Like, that's basically what it is. They basically call it super acid. Later, Venom basically uses it to melt himself and the Xenophage. She also
I'm
sets
surprised
up
it actually
the final
worked, though.
post-credit scene when she tells the guard cockroaches can survive
Oh,
anything.
yeah, I forgot
because at
she
the end
said
of the
that.
movie, the Venom symbiote reveals that it survived by bonding itself with a cockroach. Her scientist friend that always wears that Christmas pin here is named Sadie Christmas. I couldn't find any comic book information on her, so I think they just created her for the purposes of this movie. She also winds up binding to one of the other symbiotes later in the movie. When they start inspecting Patrick Mulligan, saying that his other symbiote left him for dead and they gave him another symbiote, I think the idea is that the new symbiote is meant to be their version of Toxin, and the other symbiote that left him was meant to be the Carnage symbiote that he almost got killed by. The obvious change, you
So
probably
he
heard
was
people
bonded
complaining
by
about
two,
this if
I
you're a
guess.
longtime Venom fan, is the toxin is actually meant to look more red, a little bit more like Carnage. It's meant to be the son of the Carnage symbiote and the grandson of the Venom symbiote. It is part of this long-running symbiote prophecy about being super, super powerful. Later in the
Dang,
movie, it's
that's why
basically
people were mad
eaten by
about
the
it then.
Xenophage, so RIP to Toxin. They just completely swerved on that character, it seems like. The little piece of the Venom symbiote that Sadie looks at
See, they
in
could
this
have done
vial
something
is
big
the
with
Venom
that.
symbiote that bonds with that cockroach in the post-credit scene. That's why next to it you see the broken vial where
I
it
didn't even see
escaped
that.
from. Inside her other
The
vials, there's
vial.
also the green symbiote and a pink one later that winds up going to Teddy. When she mentions that her brother's greatest ambition was working here, she's actually wearing his Roswell t-shirt that he died in. Very morbid. When we see Patrick Mulligan, he doesn't actually have much to do in this movie. Most of the time when they're talking to him, they're talking directly to the toxin symbiote,
Yeah,
which
he
can
is
detect
dead
the other
inside,
symbiotes
boy.
from inside his cell
That's
that are there,
basically just a
and detect
symbiote.
that Teddy is a metahuman with her own powers. It gives them a big info dump on Knull, god of symbiotes, why he wants the codex. They show a vision of the future. If you remember Venom Let There Be Carnage post-credits scene, the symbiote said that they can see across time and space because of the symbiote hive mind connecting them across time. It sees inside the codex with all these different symbiotes here in this weird state. Then in the future, sees Knull escaping his prison and marching off to destroy the universe with the all black in hand. The reason why Eddie and the Venom symbiote attach themselves to the outside of the plane is to get past the border in Mexico without being detected back in the
And
United
that's the
States.
only way
He
back,
makes
bro.
the Tom Cruise joke because in one of the Mission Impossible movies, Tom Cruise did a stunt outside a moving plane. You may remember that Tom Cruise briefly was going to be in the early 2000s version of the Iron Man movie before the Robert Downey Jr. version wound up happening. Kevin Feige said the reason why he is not our present-day Iron Man is because at that time in the early 2000s, he was asking the studio for way too much money. At the time,
It was
they
a
didn't think
blessing
the
in
comic book
disguise,
movies
though.
were that bankable. How wrong they were, but aren't we glad that they did not pick Tom Cruise to
It
be
was
Iron
perfect.
Man? Robert Downey
Robert
Jr.
Downey Jr.
born
is the
to
GOAT.
play the Iron Man role. Time when Tom Cruise almost showed up in a cameo scene during Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness as the 838 version of Iron Man, but couldn't because he was busy filming another Mission Impossible movie. Once Venom fully manifests again, the Xenophage detects the codex in him, jumping from the ground to the plane in the air, which was moving at super speed. There are a lot of plot holes during this too, like how fast can they move? And Venom instantly realizes what's happened and why Knull is after the codex.
Yeah, he was like,
freaking
we're
out.
cooked.
Quickly after, he then explains to Eddie that as long as he doesn't fully manifest around him like he normally would, the Xenophage won't be able to see him, setting up the running bit in the movie where Eddie can't actually use the Venom symbiote the same way that he normally would, and they have to hoof it old-fashioned style across the countryside. Until they find a horse to make more hoof puns, venomizing it, using its powers to travel faster, setting up the bit with all the venomized animals that we see throughout the movie and in the post-credit scene. While this is going down,
Not
they
lizard.
introduce Reese Ifans and his family. So
I knew
most
he
of
looked
you remember
familiar.
him as the lizard from the Andrew Garfield Amazing
But
Spider-Man
I was
movie,
like,
and
that's
he was
not
just
him.
in Spider-Man No Way Home. Like, we literally just saw him inside the MCU. If you've been watching my House of the Dragon videos the last couple of years, Season 1, Season 2, he's also Otto Hightower on House of the Dragon. Totally amazing in that role. But in this movie, he's not playing any version of his Kurt Connors inside the Venom universe.
That
He's
would have
a
been
random
kind of
hippie
crazy, too.
called Martin, and his kids are just random kids with hippie names. Like, there's nothing special about them at all, beyond the fact that he cashed out his life savings to bring his family to Area 51 here, where Area 55 is, in the final battle, so they could try to find aliens, which they do when all the symbiotes and the Xenophage bust out. I would say the only real function that he serves in the movie is as a plot device for Eddie to get back to Area 55 so that he can fight the other symbiotes. Otherwise, he's really only here for comedic relief, so I have no idea
Yeah, he
why
helped
Sony
Eddie a
would
lot,
cast
though.
him, of all people, in this role. Literally any other actor could have been in this role, and it wouldn't have changed anything about
I
the
ain't
actual
mad at
plot
it.
of the movie.
Give him some money,
Sony
man.
had to know what they were doing casting him in this role. Like, you're going to make people think that this is some sort of multiverse twist with the lizard.
Yeah.
You would think they'd use the opportunity for a couple lizard Spider-Man jokes, but nope, They do not at all. If they did, they cut it out of the movie. It wound up being a deleted scene. We'll see if the director clarifies any of that in the next couple weeks. Inside the containers at Area 55, there are 8 more symbiotes who all wind up bonding with people later
I
in the
love
movie
that
to
part.
help save the
When
Earth.
they
I'll point out which ones are based on the comics when we get to that part of the movie. Only a couple of them were based on the symbiotes from the comics. Some of them are just completely random ones that they just created for the purpose of the movie that then wind up getting eaten quickly thereafter. Rex Strickland then goes after Eddie and Venom again at the river. They use this for a couple more gags about the venomized animals, with the symbiote jumping to the fish, then a frog, symbiote frog, foreshadowing the Venom cockroach in the post-credit scene. Martin then drops Eddie off at Vegas. Tom Hardy explained the whole reason for the tuxedo scene when he knocks the dude out, pissing on him.
Peeing on him is crazy.
Gag, was meant to be a reference to the time that he was rumored to almost be the next version of James Bond. You might remember
looks
the
like
Tom
he'll be
Hardy
a good
James
version
Bond
too.
rumors from a long time ago. He said that he just wanted to show people what he might look like as Bond in a tux, briefly. But I am certain that he will not be the next version of Bond, like just a little too old. They'll probably pick someone a little bit younger when they eventually
Tom
do announce
Holland.
someone. The reason why they go
Probably.
to the casino is because the symbiote watched the Tom Cruise movie, Rain Man, another Tom Cruise reference in the movie, and thinks that it can win money at gambling because it's a cosmic being and way more advanced than normal humans. They mostly use this for a comedy bit because the symbiote quickly gets addicted to gambling, then loses all their money so that they can actually meet Mrs.
Yeah,
Chen.
that
So
happens
mostly
to a
just
lot of
setup
people
for
too.
that. Like, how can we have another gag with Mrs. Chen? We need to bring her back in the movie. The
I'm
actress
glad they
explains
did that,
during the
though.
events of this movie,
We needed
she's won a
her
fortune in gambling already.
in the
That's why she has that
last
super nice
Venom movie.
apartment inside the casino, because those are super expensive. They really only use this for the gag of Venom dancing with her. Either you love this or you absolutely hated this bit in the movie, because it doesn't really make sense, because Venom doesn't want to form over Eddie because the codex will become visible and it'll leave them exposed to the xenophage. And Venom spends most of the movie saying that they can't do this, but then he just does this to have the dance. So essentially this whole section
Hey, it's
of
Mrs.
the
Chen.
symbiote and Eddie and
You gotta
Vegas
allow
was
it.
kind of pointless. Like, the producers just wanted an excuse to film scenes in a version of Las Vegas and have this dance scene. They fight the xenophage, then Rex Strickland and the jury show up, capture Venom, Eddie, and take them back to Area 55, also where Martin's family is headed. Sadie Christmas winds up stealing the Venom symbiote and passing it back to Eddie Brock, with the xenophage
That was
entering the
clutch,
base
I ain't gonna
also,
lie.
eating the toxin symbiote, so R.I.P. Toxin. They didn't really take it that far.
Toxin
Just kind of hoping we'd see more of
sacrificed
actual comic
himself,
book
though.
Toxin. Then all the other symbiotes start bonding with people. These are the named ones from the comics. The
That's
short,
what I like to
swole,
see.
gray-looking one here is Phage. The white one is not anti-Venom. A lot of questions about this after the movie came out. It's just meant to be a random white one that they invented for the movie, like a lot of the other ones here.
Yeah, they
This blue
probably
and green
didn't bring
one that
no
combine two into
no
one
big
are just
ones
random. A
yet.
lot of them wind up getting eaten shortly
Probably
after this
later
too.
on.
Another green one bonds with Sadie because of her green Christmas tree pin. I think this one is meant to be Lasher, like hers is meant to be Lasher from the comics. They bust out and start the bigger fight in the quarry, setting up some more jokes from Reese Efon's family.
Shit,
They actually
Toxin
kind of
might not
reminded
even
me
be
in this scene
Toxin.
here, like the
They
whole
might save
twist
him
with
for
the family
later
showing
on.
up in the middle of the fight from the family from the Justice League version of Justice League, the bad version of Justice League. Like, how can we justify a random family showing up in the middle of this crazy huge fight? Teddy grabs the purple symbiote, Agony, from the comics. There's an orange symbiote with heat-based powers, but I don't think it's from the comics. It just winds up getting eaten too. Most of these wind up getting eaten. I think they made most of these up just completely brand new, knowing that they'd be gone by the end of this movie, just so they could show you a bunch of different looking symbiotes randomly. R.I.P. to all these symbiotes. Venom and Eddie then agree that this is the end for them. They say their goodbyes and make another Lethal Protector reference, which is the first comic book that they adapted
Yeah,
for the original
when they said
Venom
that,
movie. The
I
Venom
knew it
symbiote
was over.
sacrifices itself by forcing the bond with the xenophage and dragging them into the path of the super acid, melting them
Venom
Terminator 2
sacrificed
style.
himself.
Teddy then bonds with the Agony symbiote, and it also gains
Or
access
Brock,
to her
Eddie Brock.
electrical-based metahuman powers, making it like a super symbiote. Like, they want to set her up, I think, for another spin-off. There's a lot of scenes focusing on her becoming super powerful with the symbiote and her metahuman powers.
We
Like,
need
why
more
would they do that
symbiotes, bro.
unless they wanted to bring her back in a future movie? Then there's a time jump with Eddie waking up in a hospital bed, and the general here I think is meant to be the shadowy figure that Strickland kept calling
don't think
earlier in the
so.
movie. Everybody wondered, who was that shadowy government figure that kept giving him orders? All that stuff that you did the last couple years in the other Venom movies, you're good, you're free to go as long as you don't talk about what you did. Leaving him free at the end of the movie to go back to New York City to fulfill the symbiote's dream of seeing the Statue of Liberty, to the montage of Maroon
That was
5's
love right
memories
there.
showing scenes from
You
the
love to
previous
see it.
Venom movies. We just saw them do this in Deadpool and Wolverine with the X-Men, with him staring at the Statue of Liberty saying that he won't forget the symbiote.
Now that's the way to
setting
do
up
it right
the
there.
post-credit scenes, essentially revealing that it's still alive.
Showed all the
symbiote is still
memories and
alive.
stuff.
Knull has only been slowed down temporarily, and we'll see him again in more spin-offs. I already just did.
They're gonna have a
completely
like a
separate post-credit
Thanos
scene video
type
for both of
movie
the
for him,
post-credit scenes,
probably.
explaining
Hopefully,
everything that they set up, the future
they
Knull
need to.
movies, the Spider-Man references, how Venom will come back. So I had a link for that at the end of this. Generally, they do have plans for a lot more symbiote-based movies, other symbiotes from the comics, and other Knull movies in the future, multiple Knull movies. Like I said, hopefully it will not be Morbin time. Like, we don't need to bring Morbius back for any of that stuff. We will see how Kraven does later this year. If Kraven does well, then we'll probably see Kraven come back at some point.
I really hope it
Generally,
does
feels
well
like
because
Sony thinks that
Craven,
its
they did really
future
good in the
is the
Spider-Man
Venom franchise, in addition to the
game with
Spider-Verse
Kraven.
movies with live-action Miles Morales eventually too. So I think they're trying to pivot to live-action Miles Morales and more Venom stuff outside of all the other spin-offs that they do, and maybe just fold other characters in from the Venom mythos. Tom Hardy did say that there was a chance that he could come back, but his trilogy contract is up, so they'd have to back up a big dump truck of money to pay him more to actually come
Pay
back
up,
as a version of
Sony.
Venom. But he has said the last several years that he wants to cross over with Tom Holland's version of the symbiote. Secret Wars would probably be the place for them to actually do that, or the Nolan
I would like
movie
to see that.
if
I
they
think a
want
lot
Tom
of people
Holland's
would.
Spider-Man to be in that, which it sounds like Sony does. But if there's any other Easter eggs or references that you spotted in the movie that I didn't talk about in this video or in my previous post-credit scene videos, just write them below in the comments. And thank you again to Game of Thrones Legends. Download the game on
That's
Android
Mommy
and
right
iOS,
there.
and reminder that new players get
The
50
Queen
gold,
of
3,000
Dragons,
food units,
but
and a daily...
sure to like, subscribe, thanks, comment also. Adios, raza.